Another year and Summer Games Fest has come and gone once again. While I'm sure most people will focus on the big AAA games that were revealed or shown off again, I wanted to take the time today to talk about some indie games and their developers. So today, let's take a look at 4 indie developers that you should keep an eye on. Before I get to these 4 developers, really quickly, I want to shout out 3 other small indie developers. So I know I just said 4 devs, but really I'm going to talk about 7. You've been lied to and deceived. Deal with it. The first quick shout out is for Lilymo Games. This is a small indie developer co-owned by Colin Moriarty of Last Stand Media fame, and they make really cool, really good old school retro games, most notably the Habroxia games. The second quick shout out is for Nomada Studio. This is the team behind Grease and one of my favorite games from last year, Neva. I don't know what the hell they're working on next, but if their first 2 games are any indication, it's going to look beautiful. And my last shout out goes to the indie team Aggro Crab. They made the game Going Under and most recently 2024's Another Crab's Treasure, which is an excellent Souls-like, might I add. With my shout outs out of the way, let's get to the big 4 that I want to talk about now. The first indie dev that I want to talk about and that you should keep your eye on is Canada's own Drinkbox Studios. Drinkbox is probably most famous for their 2D Metroidvania Guacamelee and its sequel Guacamelee 2, but they also made the excellent dungeon crawler Severed and the 2D action game Nobody Saves the World, both of which were equally awesome. And recently at Summer Games Fest, they announced their new game, their first 3D game, Blighted. From the initial glimpses we've gotten, Blighted looks fantastic, and it's just oozing with that signature Drinkbox style that I can't get enough of. What I like about Drinkbox games, and I think what'll be a common theme for all the indie developers I'm going to talk about today, is that their games are dripping with art style, and there's tons of variety between them. Like I mentioned, the Guacamelee games are a really fun pair of Metroidvanias. Severed is a beautiful little dungeon crawler. And Nobody Saves the World is such a fun, interesting, creative little game that just had so many wonderful little ideas. The guys and gals at Drinkbox make some really good shit. And with their new game Blighted on the horizon, I cannot wait for it, and I cannot wait to see what this studio continues to do. The next indie dev I want to talk about is Heart Machine. Heart Machine first burst onto the scene with 2016's excellent Hyperlight Drifter, then in 2021 put out the very slick Solar Ash, and now currently have their first multiplayer game, Hyperlight Breaker, out in early access. Heart Machine is another excellent example of an indie developer that understands style and variety. Hyperlight Drifter was a great first outing and a wonderful 2D action game with beautiful pixel art and a cool world with a vague and mysterious story. Solar Ash felt like an evolution of Heart Machine's style, but in a 3D space, and featured really fun and smooth gameplay. I haven't played Hyperlight Breaker yet, and people seem kind of mixed on the early access version of the game so far, but it's Heart Machine, so I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. But thankfully, we already know what's coming next from Heart Machine, the cool-looking 2D action game Possessors. We don't know too much about this next game yet, but it is undeniable how cool it looks. And it feels like an evolution of what Heart Machine does best. Great art style, fun gameplay, and interesting story. I cannot wait for Possessors personally, and I hope it rocks as hard as their previous games have. The next team we have to talk about are the Game Bakers. These guys have been around for a little while now, but their first big hit and the game that put them on my radar was 2016's excellent Fury. They then went on to make 2020's Haven, and now they're hard at work on their next game, Cairn, coming out this November. I know I mentioned that each of these indie devs I was going to highlight today really focused on style and variety, but these guys do variety probably the best out of any of these teams I'm talking about. Each of their games is just so wildly different from the last one. They went from an action game and a boss rush game in Fury to this more chilled and laid back game in Haven. And now Cairn, which is this really intense climbing game, but it's also a survival game. I played the demo for Cairn, it was excellent. So you can tell just by looking at their games that these guys definitely get style, but they really nail variety. The last indie dev I want to talk about today is Beethoven and Dinosaur. Yes, that name is fantastic. Right now this team only has one game under their belt, one of my favorite games from last year, The Artful Escape, which if you haven't experienced yet, get on it, you need to. But they too have an upcoming game. Supposedly coming this year, their next game is Mixtape, which if you remember was one of the 5 games I highlighted in my 2025 games I cannot wait for. The initial look we got at this game was amazing, and we got to see a little more of it at the Summer Games Fest show, and I am just all over this. While relatively light on gameplay, The Artful Escape was such a visual feast for the eyes, and what helped make it so impactful was its character, the story, the writing, the voice acting. And that same narrative quality seems to be on display here in Mixtape. So I really don't know what to expect from this game, but all I know is I can't frickin' wait for it. And there you have it. Those are 4 indie developers that I think you should keep an eye on. If you haven't played the games they've made yet, you should really go check them out. And what's so exciting is that each of these 4 devs I've talked about all have a new video game coming on the way. So whether you know nothing about these teams or you're already a fan, there's something to be excited about from each of them. I've said it over and over again, but I'll say it again. These teams are masters of art style and variety, and they absolutely deserve your time and attention. But of course, this is only a handful of great indie developers out there. There are so many small, talented teams out there, and it feels like there's more and more coming up every day. There's never been a better time to be a fan of indie games, and I know that there's an indie game out there for everyone. You just have to go find it. Hopefully with this video, I've maybe pointed you towards some that you might enjoy. And maybe you have some indie devs you like. Let me know some of your favorite devs. And let me know if you check out any of the devs or their games that I talked about today. For now, that's all I've got. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you around.